And of course, this is not the first time those two forms of entertainment have been linked to kids becoming more violent. But is it true? Our senior health correspondent Monica Robbins tells us it's complicated.
We're surrounded by violent images nearly everywhere we look, but in violent video games, usually targeted to kids, can they really lead to aggressive or violent behavior?
While many believe video games are a direct cause to the violent behavior being exerted across the world, others argue that the violence is not from video games but from something else entirely. With one side arguing that the increase in aggression is to blame, and the other showcasing the distressing mechanism that video games hold creates a controversial topic that needs to be debated.
As technology advances and expands, becoming a standard for everyday life, the worry about an increase in violence arises.
As the market for video game rises, we take a look at the sales of video games to the number of crimes being committed over the years. Nick Rocks gives us an insight on this potential correlation.
Thank you, Brendan. The rise in sales of video games have shined some light on the connection to the number of crimes being committed dating back to the 1990s. According to experts in the field of criminology, Kevin McCaffrey and Ryan Proctor found that video game sales have had a huge success during the 1990s, and at that time of that success was the start of the Great American Crime Decline. During this time period in American history, crime rates were on the verge of decline, and in respects of video game sales, they soared, proving that video games have no direct correlation to violence.
Statistics found by Scott Cunningham and his colleagues, who are experts within the field of economics, shared that a 1% increase in video game sales and a 0.3% decrease in crime rates followed. But the question still remains, how are the games attributing to the decline of violent acts?
Addressed in Jamie Madigan's book, Getting Gamers, the term spatial presence is referenced many times. It states that spatial presence is a psychological state in which gamers undergo while playing these games. It is a trance-like state that distracts these gamers from their surroundings as well as the real world, fixating their eyes and minds to the TV screen. Interview with Karen Clue, a mother of two, describes her experience with spatial presence.
So I noticed when you and Cam were growing up, Cameron was more into video games than you were. Every time I called him for dinner, he either wouldn't answer or he would say just a minute, and then 5-10 minutes would go by. He still didn't come down, so I'd go up and check on him and tell him dinner's ready. And I would notice he was in like a trance-like state, so he probably never even heard me. But I really, he always seemed to be very into his videos, and it made it almost impossible for him to go out and commit a crime or anything.
Thank you, Ms. Clue. As it seems, these distractions provided by video games are a way for gamers to escape reality. However, many people believe these distractions within the world of video games can lead to negative responses to the brain's reward system.
Investigated by a well-known psychologist and expertise in neurocriminology, Adrian Rain found that a long-term exposure to video games among children at the age of 11 created a sensation-seeking preference for aggressive behavior at the age of 3.
This long-term study describes that extensive exposure to graphic video games are psychologically dangerous to the human brain. The sensation of killing an opponent within these games are presented in a way as if they are acceptable. However, it may not be that simple. Scientist Greg Phillips gives us more.
While our brain possesses the reward system, it also has another function. The brain is able to depict what is real from fiction. Psychologists Christopher Ferguson and Dominic Dyke found that the brain has an ability to distinguish what is real from what is not. They also found how children use context within a message to interpret if the information is truthful. These abilities of the brain are significant as they can decipher what is real or not within video games. The brain is able to filter out the false information going into the brain, allowing for a realization that these games and sensations are false.
Thank you, Greg, for providing information on the brain's function and providing a clearer picture that reinforces the negative correlation between video games and violence.
Because of the sales of the video games during the 1990s, the distraction of video games provide the brain's functionality alludes to the negative correlation between video games and violence.
So the next time a crime is being addressed, don't be so hasty to point fingers that suggest that video games are to blame for the violent acts. But instead, realize that there are multiple variables at play and additional research is needed to be conducted in order to figure out a solution.